Hello and welcome to the Evening Standards, the Nutmeg. I'm Dan Kilpatrick and I'm joined by Simon Collings, Jack Rosser and James Robson to discuss this weekend's FA Cup third round action. We're going to start with Tottenham, who beat 8th tier Marine 5-0 to progress to the fourth round in the biggest mismatch in the competition's history. There were 160 places between Premier League Spurs and Marine of the Northern Premier League Division 1 Northwest. And really, it was an occasion that wasn't so much about the match itself, but it was about the event and the evening for Marine. Fans, of course, were locked out of the stadium, but their tiny ground on Merseyside was flanked by terraced houses on each side, so there was plenty of colour from the game. There was one point in the second half where Gareth Bale and Jack Clarke were warming up just in front of where I was sitting, and a dog in one of the neighbouring houses started barking, and Clarke literally leapt out of his skin. There were floodlight failures. One of the temporary floodlights was kind of blinking on and off. There were plenty of people shouting things from the neighbouring houses at Mourinho, at the Spurs players. So even though it was behind closed doors, it really did feel like a proper cup tie and a kind of nice occasion in all the gloom at the moment. I think from a Spurs point of view, the big story was Alfie Devine, who came off the bench to become the club's youngest ever goal scorer on his debut. He scored their fifth goal after replacing Moussa Sissoko at half-time. And probably Dele Alli was the star of the first half. He created the first two goals for Carlos Vinicius, who scored a first-half hat-trick. The other goal was scored by Lucas Moura, who bagged a direct free kick. Jack, I know you were watching the game on telly. What did you make of Dele? I mean, from my point of view, it was kind of the best and worst of Dele, I think. You know, there are a couple of examples of those flicks that enraged Mourinho in the game at Stoke before Christmas, but there are also a couple of examples of really good, patient bits of play in the final third that eventually got the breakthrough for Spurs. I suppose my question is, how much does that kind of performance count against the side at Marine's level? You know, will that give him credit in the bank to kind of push on and get more appearances under Mourinho?
I don't think it would do him any harm. I think there was a line from Mourinho, I think it was pre-match, sort of said it's more about the attitude that those who are given a chance show. It's not about quality. I mean, you know, you spoke about the gap there, 160 places. You can't judge players up against a side like Marine on quality because there's just nothing to compare there. But I think he showed a really good attitude. He was on it. There was, you know, he's had so many suggestions from Mourinho about being lazy in training. So it's the sort of game that if he fits into that sort of branding from Mourinho, then he'd go out and just sort of try far too many of those flicks and try and show off a bit. But there was some impressive play, like you said, keeping hold of the ball well and a really nice ball through to Vinicius for one of his goals. I think it was the first goal. So there was an impressive showing in terms of his attitude, his application, how much it will play into Mourinho going forward. You really don't know because you sort of don't feel like he trusts him at all to go in the Premier League. He's got a sort of established side in terms of, or established players that he likes to turn to with Dyer, Højbjerg, Sissoko, Kane and Son, obviously, that he really trusts to go out there and perform the way he wants them to perform. So it won't hurt Dele. His attitude was good, but I don't know how much it will help him going forward.
Yeah, I think I did worry that Mourinho would pay more attention to the flicks that didn't come off. There was one where he almost tried a kind of half rainbow flick over a Marine player, and that led to one of their few chances where James Joyce had a shot blocked by Roden. So I did wonder whether Mourinho would almost remember those flicks more than his contributions in the final third. But I have to say that he hasn't been shy about criticising Dele in public this season, obviously, and he made a point of saying afterwards that he really liked his performance and that him and Gedson Fernandes, which was quite a surprise because I thought he was awful. But Mourinho said him and Gedson Fernandes kind of set the tone for Spurs and were the catalyst for that first half blitz when they scored 4 times in 17 minutes. It's obviously feeling very positive for Spurs in the Cups at the moment. They're in the Europa League last 16, they're in the League Cup final, and they're now into the FA Cup fourth round. And if they keep getting kind draws in the FA Cup, given Mourinho's determination to take all those competitions seriously, I can genuinely see them making another deep run, which, of course, at the moment is having implications over fixture scheduling in the Premier League. We understand this morning the Premier League is considering rescheduling Spurs' game against Fulham, which was cancelled on December 30th for Wednesday. and postponing their match at Aston Villa to play for the same night. I'll say a quick word on Gareth Bale as well. Came off the bench on about the hour. I think that was another great element of the match from a Marine point of view, the chance for those kind of non-league players, the plumbers and teachers and refuse men to play against a four-time Champions League winner. You know, that's something they can tell their grandkids. So he didn't do an awful lot. Bale forced a save out of the keeper from a free kick, and I think it's fair to say it's time for him to start stepping up now he's fit again. I'm going to move on to Arsenal now, but before we do, don't forget to like, share and comment if you're watching. You can do that on Twitter and Facebook. Arsenal beat Norwich 2-0 to progress to the fourth round. Simon, you were there. Emil Smith-Rowe, a standout player again, and scored one of Arsenal's extra time goals. What do you make of his performance?
Yeah, I thought he had a really good afternoon's work and a really impressive performance, and it could have been very different. He obviously had that incident with Longstaff where he brought him down and the referee gave him a red card. And, you know, we talked on here about Arsenal's discipline issues and red cards, and you thought for a moment, here we go again. But it was one of those instances where VAR, you know, was correctly executed, used in the proper way. The referee went over, rescinded it to a yellow. I think Danny Murphy on BBC commentary was saying Smith-Rowe was unlucky to get a yellow card. But as it was, he sort of bounced back from that and finished off a really good goal. And I think for him, it was, you know, he's had some good performances when he's come into the team. You know, that Chelsea game, that Brighton game, but it was quite a telling performance for him because he started on the bench along with Saka. And they were the cavalry for Arsenal. They were the players that Arteta brought on to win the game. You know, he took off Willian, he took off, you know, Pepe late on, and it was these young kids who went on to win the game. So I think in a way it was less minutes than he's had in other matches, but it was just as important. And I think really now it would have underlined to Arteta that the likes of Smith-Rowe and Saka are now the first team players who've got to drive this team forward.
You've been writing a lot this season, as is our Arsenal columnist, Alan Smith, that Arteta should look to the young players in his squad to rebuild this Arsenal side. Do you feel like Smith-Rowe is genuinely starting to solve that creativity problem and fill the boots of Mesut Ozil, if you like? Because a lot of people have been kind of crying out for Ozil to come back in the team, to be reintegrated into the squad, given Arsenal's creativity problem. But that looks like it might be a problem of the past as it stands.
Yeah, I think, you know, we need to be careful with Smith-Rowe and give him a sort of long, you know, period of games to assess him. But what he's done in the short term, I think he just offers what Arteta wants from a number 10. He obviously wants creativity. And, you know, Mesut Ozil provides that. But I think what Smith-Rowe gives him is, you know, work rate off the ball, his ability to track back, to press, and his ability to impact the game in both boxes. He is a number 10, but if you actually watch him play, the effort he makes to help out the two midfielders behind him is really telling. And I think from Arteta, that's what he's massively wanted as a 10. It's perhaps why, you know, it hasn't worked out with Mesut Ozil. Of course, there's a number of reasons around him not being in the squad. But I think what we've seen from Smith-Rowe is what going forward Arteta expects from a number 10. It's not someone who's just a creative player, but someone who works very hard off the ball. And Smith-Rowe, he's had a few loans at Arsenal, and I think one of them that's been really important was that one at Leipzig. He didn't actually play that much. He had these sort of growing pains, but he learned under Ralf Rangnick the importance of pressing without the ball. And coaches at Arsenal were saying when he came back from that, they really seen a step up in it. So I think from Arsenal, what they're getting from Smith-Rowe is a more complete number 10 without the ball, and that is what is getting him in the team at the moment.
The performances of Smith-Rowe and Bukayo Saka have only further highlighted the struggles of Willian and Pepe. James, Chelsea must be looking at Willian's performances this season with some interest, given he left them for Arsenal on a free transfer and signed a 3-year deal. I mean, what's happened to him this year?
I would imagine Chelsea are feeling pretty fortunate that he didn't take them up on their offer to keep him there, because they didn't want him to go. So I've looked at that one time and again this season and just wondered what on earth would they have done if he'd stayed, because they've already got a lot of wide attacking players as it is. We'll talk about Hudson-Odoi later on, who can't get many games. Look, it's becoming a bit of a theme, this, and unfortunately for Arsenal, that seems to be a place where players go to, let's say, a bit of a retirement home, let's say. You look at the likes of Ozil with his new deal, the way Aubameyang's form has kind of dropped since he got a new deal. I would worry if I was Arsenal about all this talk of a new deal for Lacazette. Again, it's that sort of age point where you think the last thing you want to do is tie a player of that age to your club, which is precisely what they did with Willian when they signed him. Big contract, loads of money. And look, I'm not saying that, I'm not questioning his attitude at all, but I think it is natural when you get to a certain age, you're a certain comfort level, let's say, and that hunger just isn't there. And they're seeing with the young players at Arsenal right now, that hunger is worth so much, and you can't fake that. And that's the thing. And whether it's an imperceptible drop or not, if you drop down just a slight level, it can make all the difference.
Simon, how much of a difference has Pablo Mari made at the back for Arsenal? I saw Arteta's been talking about him recently.
Yeah, so I mean, I did a piece on him yesterday evening for the website, and he's probably someone who's gone a bit under the radar simply because of how good all the young players have been. You know, Saka and Smith Rowe going forward being fantastic, but at the back, I think he's come in and been a real calming presence, which is not something we talk about much when it comes to Arsenal and defending. And, you know, he was thrown in there on Boxing Day pretty much because Arsenal didn't really have any other options. You know, David Luiz was out ill. Gabriel had been diagnosed with COVID-19. So Mari was thrown in. It was, you know, only his second Premier League start of his career, and the last time he started a Premier League game was back in March, you know, so ages since he'd been in the team. And he's come in and just looked calm and assuring. And I think the biggest thing for his benefit going forward is that he is a left-footed centre-half, and Arteta has really prioritised having a left-foot, right-foot combination, a bit like Pep at Man City when he's got Laporte alongside someone. Arteta really likes that. And Gabriel has been his number one left-footed centre-half. But I think Mari now has put a case forward that when Gabriel's back playing, he should probably start, because Arsenal have kept 3 clean sheets in a row, and Mari's been a big factor in that.
And just finally on Arsenal, the FA Cup's almost become their trophy in a sense over the last few years, almost in the same way that, you know, the Europa League, Sevilla's and the Champions League was Real Madrid. So what's the secret behind Arsenal's success in there? And even given their, you know, well-documented struggles in the Premier League this season, do you see them having another strong campaign in the FA Cup?
Yeah, I mean, what's the secret behind it? I don't know. I mean, a lot of the success goes down to Arsene Wenger's work in the FA Cup. And I think the latter years, or certainly the last decade, the FA Cup probably became more of a priority because, you know, those major trophies of the Champions League and the Premier League weren't in the club's eye line, and you shift your goals and you go for trophies you can win. And I think credit needs to go for Wenger, his ability to do that. And certainly, you know, those last few years, he will have those FA Cups as a legacy of the success he had. And for Arsenal last season, you know, the FA Cup really did save it. But it was interesting, I think I noticed at the time, you know, Arteta sort of making the point, longer term, it can't be defined a successful season when you're looking at the end of it and you come away with an FA Cup. You know, he will have bigger aspirations than that. But I think in the short term, when he's, you know, trying to build foundations, build a legacy, something like an FA Cup can make a big difference, you know. And I think the confidence Arsenal had from that, we thought would be greater. It hasn't been. But I think for this season, they'll again look at the FA Cup as something that's not a priority. But the time you get to March, April, and you need something quantifiable to show success, it becomes a key competition.
Let's move on to Chelsea now. But don't forget to like, share and comment on Twitter and Facebook if you're on those platforms. Chelsea beat Morecambe 4-0 to return to winning ways. Frank Lampard named a very strong side. James, was that a measure of how precarious the situation had become for Lampard?
I think it sent out a statement. I think time will tell if it was desperation or if it was a managerial masterstroke. You know, we'll wait and see on that one. The last thing he needed was an FA Cup upset on his hands, given Chelsea's recent run. So he left nothing to chance, and that was it. And they did exactly what he wanted them to do. Obviously, there were huge bonuses with Timo Werner getting a goal. He's just desperate for a goal. It's 12 games without scoring. Kai Havertz got a goal. You saw the confidence flowing in him, and we haven't seen that for a long, long time. So we'll see if this prompts a kick-start in their season, a kick-start in those players' careers. But I think also you look at Kurt Zouma and Mason Mount. I mean, they're virtual ever-presents. You think if anyone deserved the rest, it'd be that pair. But then you think, well, actually, they've been part of a losing team now for quite a while. So it'll just do their confidence the world of good to be in a side that actually won a game and enjoyed a game, which you haven't felt for a while with Chelsea. But the thing that stood out for me was that this run they're on, it dates back really to that Krasnodar game in the Champions League last month, which was a dead rubber. And Lampard kept saying going into that game, he kept saying, you can't just turn form on and off. And he said, we're going to take it seriously because we're in a really good run. They were on a 16-game unbeaten run at that time. And he made a lot of changes, and understandably so. But they drew that game, and it was drab. And it just, you can date it back to then when this run of defeats and just this absolute slump from top to ninth kicked in, and maybe this will have the reverse effect.
Jack, we talked about it with Dele Alli at the top of the show about how these games against lower league sides may not ultimately mean that much, but Werner's in a different situation to Ali in that he has been playing regularly this season. He just hasn't been scoring. So you would think that getting a goal in any game against any opposition, they might see the confidence flow back into him and could be something of a turning point. You know, is that what Frank Lampard and Chelsea fans should be hoping after this weekend?
Certainly what they will be hoping for. And I think his goal, if I'm right, came from Ziyech to Havertz and then Havertz knocking it down for Werner, which is, you know, regardless of who it's against, it's a combination of their three biggest signings finally getting going and showing what they can do, and something that they'll want to be able to repeat against anyone. And if, you know, the quality that Ziyech can put on a cross, it doesn't matter who they're playing, he'll still be able to find Havertz regardless of whatever back four they're trying to unpick. So it's massive. And like James was saying, the fact that he went with a strong team to get going, I always remember, we'll come on to Palace in a bit, I think, but whenever they used to make so many changes and get dumped out of the FA Cup, and you get the obvious question to Roy Hodgson afterwards of, you know, is that going to dent your league form? And he just used to say it's a completely different side, it'll make no difference. So it obviously does have some sort of impact having this same settled side going out, putting in a confidence performance. There may be a few changes, but they'll be desperately hoping that sort of combination for the goal can prove to those new players that they can do it in English football regardless of who they're playing against.
James, how important is it that Chelsea offload players this month?
I think it's vital. And Lampard he doesn't want to make headlines at the moment, so he's not really naming names, although he named Tomori last night. Because something that's really confused me is I've read quite a lot during this run they've been on, is that Lampard doesn't know his strongest team, and this is the problem for him. He doesn't know his strongest team. I'd say the problem is the complete opposite. He plays pretty much, if they're fit, you know what his 1 to 11 is. It's pretty much set in stone. I think the big issue is that he doesn't trust the players to come in and replace them. And the trouble is those players are big characters, senior players on a lot of money. And, you know, any footballer, any football manager will tell you that you don't want that type of player twiddling their thumbs. Now, I'm not saying they're troublemakers at Chelsea or anything, but it's not a healthy environment to have a top player just sitting around on the bench. I'm thinking of someone like Alonso, who often he's not even anywhere near the bench. You know, he's a quality player and has been a brilliant player for Chelsea, but he's nowhere near this team. So there's not a lot of, that doesn't bring any positive vibes to the squad when you've got someone like that just hanging around. And he's not alone. You know, Tomori, desperate to play, and it didn't even get a start yesterday against Morecambe. You thought he would. Those sort of things don't help. And the fact that he plays Mason Mount constantly, the fact that he's played Werner throughout all of his pretty ropey form in recent weeks, it just shows you that he's not confident about who can come in and replace them.
Interesting, James, saying that about, you know, Chelsea wanting to offload players. I think it's pretty similar with Arsenal, to be honest. Obviously, we know all about Mesut Ozil and the desire to get rid of him, but, you know, Sokratis, Kolasinac, Mustafi. I think what has happened with the pandemic has made it exceptionally difficult for clubs to operate in the transfer window. You know, Arteta spoke about it the other week, saying everything's done over Zoom, over phone. You've got the situation with players who, you know, if you think of the issues of moving around your own country, but if you're someone with a family in a city and you're saying, right, we're going to move countries during a global crisis and a pandemic, are you going to want to do that? Particularly when you're being very well paid. So I think clubs are really finding it difficult to sell players right now, particularly for money. You can see some loans and stuff, but I think Chelsea's struggles of trying to get rid of players is something that Arsenal are feeling as well. And I imagine most of the big clubs in the Premier League are feeling as well.
Yeah, I mean, I know Spurs have to, or rather want to, sell before they can buy this January. They'd probably like to bring in one new face, I think, but there's players to offload like Danny Rose, Paulo Gazzaniga, Gedson Fernandes could go back to Benfica. So yeah, I think a lot of clubs are in a similar situation, as you say. Simon, you mentioned Arsenal bringing through young players like Smith Rowe and Bukayo Saka to rev up their season. James, could a similar thing happen at Chelsea? Billy Gilmour and Hudson-Odoi both impressed against Morecambe. Should Lampard be using them more? I mean, you talked about him playing the same team every time there. Are they two players in particular you'd like to see break into that trusted group?
I definitely would. And I think they're the type of players, when you talk about strength and depth, they're the kind of ones that you want knocking on the door trying to get in. Billy Gilmour, he's a 19-year-old lad, he's barely played, but has looked absolutely brilliant every time he comes into the side. He's a great player to have around the squad, even if he's not playing, because there's just that energy and he's just a sponge wanting to learn. I personally think he should play more. Lampard wouldn't rule out the possibility of him going out on loan when I asked him that last month. I don't think he's going to go out on loan. He shouldn't go out on loan because I think he brings such quality to this team. And he's already proved, look, he played against Liverpool, was fantastic last season. You can put him in any situation and he'll do a really good job for you. As for Hudson-Odoi, it's a strange one with him because Lampard is always pretty reserved with his praise or credit for him. I'm not entirely sure why that is. I'm sure he has his reasons, and maybe he feels he's one who works better with stick rather than carrot. I'm not quite sure, but he's a player who, whenever he comes in, whenever I see him play, he makes a difference, and that's a great addition to have to a squad. And he scored again yesterday, made one. I think he's really knocking on the door to challenge Ziyech and also Pulisic.
Jack and James, can I just quickly get your view on the potential for the Fulham-Chelsea game on Friday night being moved? As I said at the top of the show, it looks like the Premier League are considering postponing Villa-Spurs on Wednesday night and then rescheduling Spurs-Fulham for that evening. That would then have a knock-on effect because Fulham are playing Chelsea 48 hours later. So that game could be pushed back to Saturday. First of all, James, just briefly, do you think there'd be any kind of issue at Chelsea if that were to happen?
I suppose if it's, as long as it doesn't affect Chelsea's fixtures further down the line, then no, there's no great issue there, is there? I'm assuming it's only on the Friday because of television reasons anyway. So I don't really see there being too much of a problem there at the moment. Lampard, I think, will welcome any sort of gap he can get between games.
And Jack, do you understand Fulham's frustration at the potential for that game to be moved to Wednesday?
Yeah, I think so. I think they've got to be, they had 2 weeks off, and Scott Parker said they wanted to use the QPR game on Saturday as a sort of a game to get back up to speed again. And there's going to be some risk of coming straight back in and playing so many games in such quick succession. They played 120 minutes as well in the win over QPR. That went to extra time. And I think given that obviously they're not in any European competition or anything like that, they've got a slightly more flexible schedule. They'd rather avoid playing Tottenham and Chelsea in quick succession if they can. They've been on a fairly decent run, so obviously 2 games like that could unsettle it fairly quickly. So I think if it happens, they'll deal with it. They've got a massive squad, frankly, and they're able to move it about at the moment with the registration window being open, so they could handle it. But I don't think it would be ideal.
Yeah, from what I understand this morning, Fulham are partly unhappy because they didn't know about this before the QPR game. So potentially, had they known they were playing Spurs on Wednesday, Parker might have picked his team or picked his substitutes slightly differently. If you're on Twitter or Facebook, don't forget to like, share and comment. It's a big help and we appreciate all interactions. Let's move on to Crystal Palace, and a pretty dismal display from them as they were dumped out of the FA Cup by Wolves. No shots on target in 90 minutes. A very boring display from Roy Hodgson's side. Jack, they do seem to just be kind of existing at the moment, Palace, more than anything else. They're probably going to stay up. but not do much else. And that's the criticism that could be levelled at a few clubs, and certainly has been levelled at the top of my head off, at Mike Ashley's Newcastle, for example. Are Palace in danger of just becoming one of those clubs who just don't really do much, or do you think they could even be dragged into a relegation scrap this year?
I think they'll always be all right without, in terms of a relegation scrap. Hodgson came in and did a fantastic job to get them out of trouble after that wonderful success that was Frank de Boer for 4 games. And he sort of always guarantees you safety, which, when you speak to the interviews I've done with Steve Parish in the past, the importance of staying in the Premier League for as long as they have. This is their longest run as a Premier League side ever. It's a really big factor for the club and what they're trying to do. They're investing a lot behind the scenes. They put 20 million into the academy. They want to put 100 million in terms of redeveloping parts of Selhurst Park. So staying in the Premier League is hugely important. But you're right, it's all becoming a bit predictable, and Friday night was a perfect example. Like I mentioned earlier, they've always rotated a lot in the cups and never had too much success in those competitions under Hodgson. But it was a strong team that they put out against Wolves, and they just did absolutely nothing. They were solid enough at the back. It was a great goal from Traore that won it for Wolves. But just going forward, there was no urgency with the Palace players and no sort of sense of adventure. Zaha came on and changed it a bit, but it wasn't too exciting. I think you speak to one or two around the club, maybe on the recruitment side as well. There's been suggestions that they want to go for another sexy manager. Someone said to me once, which worked well again last time, didn't it, when they went for Frank de Boer. But Hodgson's contract's up in the summer. He seems to be getting increasingly frustrated with football in general, always raging about VAR and different handball rules and things like that. So it might be a time to use the foundation he's built. He's built a fantastic foundation, and then see where they can go from there.
I think this idea of just being a Premier League club is an odd one. It's a criticism that's been thrown at many clubs if they don't take the cup seriously, supposedly so. Just being a Premier League club is absolutely enormous, and the vast majority of football fans, the whole world, well, the whole country over, would love to just support a Premier League club. For like Jack was saying, for Palace to have been and become an established Premier League club is enormous. Now, that shouldn't be underestimated, even if they don't win anything at all. They're a Premier League club. That is fantastic. And in Hodgson, I'd let him stay for as long as he wants, because like Jack says, you're guaranteed to be a Premier League club. I remember Charlton fans complaining that, they didn't have enough ambition. Well, look what happened then after they lost their manager. I'd be careful what you wish for.
Fair point. And just to pick you up on something there, Jack, are you saying Roy Hodgson isn't a sexy manager?
Well, it's not for me to say, but maybe, some fans and a couple of people in the club would prefer someone a little more appealing.
Fair enough. On that note, we're going to end this week's Nutmeg. Thanks so much for watching. As I said, please do interact on social media. You can like, share, comment, ask us questions on Facebook and Twitter. And we'll be back next Monday to discuss next weekend's action.